Hey YouTubers, this is the Gold Standard 924 coming at you with Chapter 12 in my Wrestling Reimagining series for WWE 2006. For today's video, I'll be tackling the Raw November pay-per-view event, which will be Cyber Sunday. Now, going into this show, I was really reluctant on even going out my way to book, in my eyes, what a filler pay-per-view as far as that example is concerned. Now, when WWE started those brand exclusive pay per view events, they started adding more pay per view events into their calendar year, starting in 2004 when WWE brought back the likes of the Great American Bash as a result of them purchasing WCW and the licensing to their events. And then there was also a new pay per view that they had in October, shortly after No Mercy, which would be Taboo Tuesday. Afterwards, we also got the addition of New Year's Revolution, being held in January, just weeks before the Royal Rumble. Now we get to 2006, and that trend sort of continues, and now WWE has the addition of the ECW brand, and they would have at least one pay per view that year. December to Dismember. With Taboo Tuesday that I was referencing just a little moments ago, renamed Cyber Sunday, as opposed to being held on Tuesday, the pay-per-view would be held obviously on Sunday with the same motif that was carried over from the previous iteration, that this would involve on the emphasis of fan interaction, having WWE fans go online to cast in their votes as far as like match stipulations concerned, like which of these superstars would you like to see them compete in, like whether if it's like a ladder match or a steel cage match, falls count anywhere, etc., or which particular wrestler would you like to see to go up against this particular opponent. And you had to go out online and cast in your vote, and whoever gets the highest votes, they'll compete in whatever match that was selected for them. Now, Cyber Sunday, while the idea wasn't bad in particular, it just really kind of feels as though when I was going into this video, just really had to ask myself, it's like, was this pay-per-view like really necessary? And you have Survivor Series coming up in the next couple weeks, and the idea of having like two pay-per-views so close to each other would sort of overlap one another, and there's just not as much room to breathe when it comes to building up potential storylines leading into a major pay-per-view event. And Cyber Sunday to me felt like watching a 3-hour episode of Monday Night Raw, but except you have to go out your way and spend like somewhere between 45 to 60 bucks on a minor pay-per-view, like for instance Cyber Sunday. Like I've been doing with some of these minor pay-per-views, I'm going to really try and do the best I can to put together the quote-unquote best card possible and see what I could potentially cook up with. So like always, I'll just provide that down the description box below and see what you all guys think about the card. Before I get started with that, actually, there was a card that I structured for Monday Night Raw. And normally I don't necessarily book TV shows leading into pay-per-views. I mean, I could have done that back with Saturday night's main event, because WWE did in fact revive the Saturday night's main event show. They ran two shows, one in March leading into WrestleMania 22, and they also had one in July leading into the Great American Bash. But looking back, with Saturday night's main event, it wasn't something that I really wanted to consider booking super shows, and I just want to get to like straight to the pay-per-view, and I would explain a little more basic information as far as what would happen at that Saturday night's main event. It was only a 2-hour show. There wasn't really a whole lot of matches that you could book on there, but other than mentioning some key important moments that would happen, that would transpire throughout the super shows, So I just didn't think that was like really necessary to book a show that would consist of like 4 or 5 matches, considering it's like only a 2 hour show. Unlike Saturday night's main event, as far as the what WWE did in October was doing the family reunion special that they did the Raw after No Mercy. Now, the family reunion special is the 1 year anniversary since WWE had regained the rights to air their programs on the USA Network once again. And this would include the time when superstars from not only just Monday Night Raw itself, but also superstars that compete on Smackdown and the newly revived ECW would also play a part in this particular TV special. This was actually 3 hours, and this was before WWE went their way to make Raw into 3 hours on a consistent basis. But back in those days when Raw was 2 hours, occasionally they'll do like these big super shows and extend it to 3 hours. I figured, try and put together a stat card possible, like somewhere about, I booked about 8 to 9 matches. I'll just discuss about some of the matches, including the wrestlers that would go over such and such, and explain what will happen as the show will roll along. Now, for the first match that I booked on to the first match that would open up Monday Night Raw, I would have a sort of a SmackDown base TV style match on Raw. Like I said, just basically a family reunion special, so you might as well utilize some of the superstars from the other rosters as well. So definitely trying to make the most out of this opportunity. And Shane Helms and Shannon Moore, they'll be in a tag team match to face Matt Hardy and a partner of his choosing. Now, after No Mercy, after the match between Shane and Matt Hardy, a backstage confrontation ensues between Matt and Teddy Long. Teddy Long books a tag team match for tomorrow nights on Raw, and he gives Matt an opportunity to decide which partner that he will team up with. And it doesn't necessarily have to be someone on SmackDown, but it could also be anyone on like ECW, or it could be someone from Monday Night Raw. So Teddy Long gives Matt Hardy some a freedom of choice as far as who he would team up to face the likes of Shane Helms and Shannon Moore. So the following night after No Mercy, Monday Night Raw happens. Shane Helms and Shannon Moore come out, the first match on the show, cut a little brief promo and just trashing on Matt Hardy and bragging about how he went over Matt at No Mercy, yada, yada, yada. But then, once Shane concludes his promo, Matt Hardy's music hits. Matt Hardy's coming out, he's standing on stage, and Shane and Shannon are just kind of overconfident because Matt Hardy's just all alone, and they think that Matt has made the decision to make it a handicap match. Matt Hardy does rebuttal as far as coming out with the mic on his hands and basically talking about that. You think that this is going to be a handicap match? Well, guess again, because as of this moment, the partner of my choosing, but he doesn't say the name of the wrestler, and he just kind of waits for his partner to show up. And then we hear the familiar entrance music. Jeff Hardy comes out, and the crowd hopefully will go to this huge, huge pop. And the announcers would just put it over. It's like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. And, Jeff and Matt Hardy, for the first time in 4 years, reunite and take on Shane and Shannon Moore. The Hardy Boys, multi-time tag team champions. These two siblings back together once again. They both go out there and have a hell of a match. The Hardy Boys are going to go over Shane and Shannon. I will have Matt Hardy be the legal man to pin Shane Helms in order to not only win this match, but especially with the Hardys, with this one-off reunion match of sorts. But yeah, I think this could be a really great way to open up the show. I don't think they ever ran a match between the two teams, especially since all four of these guys are really close friends, especially living in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I think this could be a really huge moment. And you talk about family reunions, and Jim Ross would just kind of put that over in his commentary, talking about how the Hardys reunited on this so-called reunion show, and try to, emphasize on that as well. But yeah, I think this could be a really fun TV style match, and the Hardys will go over Shane, Helms, and Shannon Moore in the process. Then the following match will be Chris Benoit going over Ric Flair. Now, Benoit had just came back from his sabbatical at No Mercy. I would have Benoit take on his former protege, former Four Horsemen stablemate, Ric Flair. Now, Flair is in the midst of his program with Chris Masters, so Masters will obviously interfere in this match and somehow find a way to cost Ric Flair and come up short against Chris Benoit in this match. But this is more of like a face versus face, some technically sound match, some mat-based wrestling here and there. But yeah, so they had some really good to great chemistry. So this could be another match to kind of follow up the Hardys and Shane and Shannon Moore. So I think this could be a really good match, even though the interference would kind of dip down the quality just a little bit. But this is more towards like storyline purposes and really try to kind of position Chris Masters as a viable threat against a legend like Ric Flair. So I'll have Benoit go over Flair in the process. Now we have is a rematch from Vengeance. Nick Dinsmore taking on Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Now, this would be the first match since the actual match that, in my universe, that they would have had at Vengeance. So Nick Dinsmore, the first time around in their initial counter, defeated Jim Duggan and assaults Duggan to the point where he would be sidelined, out of action, off TV for quite a while. However, Jim Duggan does, however, return sometime at Unforgiven to support his friend Sergeant Slaughter. But even despite what happened at Unforgiven, so this feud kind of escalates with Duggan and Slaughter having this strong partnership, sort of like they did in the early 90s. And Dinsmore has Matt Striker by his corner. So this is kind of turned into like this 2-on-2 warfare that eventually it would be announced at Cyber Sunday that this would be a tag team match. Hacksaw Duggan, Sergeant Slaughter taking on Matt Striker and Nasty Nick Dinsmore. But since this is the Raw Family Reunion special, this is going to be sort of a rematch. The first match that they had since the not the July pay-per-view, the June pay-per-view. But Jim Duggan will go over Nick Dinsmore. And basically, because of the circumstances that have happened as far as Matt Striker's role when it comes to being involved in matches involving Nick Dinsmore, actually he will be banned from ringside. So he's all alone. And we also have these legends that are sitting front row in the crowd. Guys like Arn Anderson and Ron Simmons, who were actually at the show at the time. They were under contract also, but they did, however, show up in the real version of the Raw episode. But they're going to play a part in this match, and well, they won't necessarily like go all physical on Nick Dinsmore, but their presence is going to kind of leave Dinsmore sort of intimidated and kind of use as a distraction. Jim Duggan's going to have the advantage here, and he's going to go over Nick Dinsmore. It's something to kind of advance the storyline, but not also make it not too one-sided. But Jim Duggan's going to get an opportunity to up one over Nick Dinsmore here. Then we have is not really a match, but this is going to be sort of like a squash match where Carlito's going to go over Rob Conway. But Carlito's still kind of in his program with John Cena, so I'm going to kind of continue to enhance Carlito and try to rack up some victories, especially with the loss that he had with Cena. He still sets his eye out on him, and Carlito kind of uses Conway as sort of like a punching bag just to kind of have Carlito go out his way to cut a promo saying that he's still got Cena's number, and whenever the time is right, that he'll be back. He's going to get his revenge, and we take it from there. Then we have the last man standing match, which is Batista taking on Randy Orton. Referring back to my previous installment with No Mercy, Orton interfered in the match. He cost Batista the world title once again. So Booker had retained the world heavyweight title. So Batista is just completely furious about this. And Orton, who had been sidelined for a number of weeks as a result of the injury sustained from Batista with the spine busters. So Orton and Batista are kind of sanctioned in this last man standing match. Orton's kind of sporting a rib tape, but he kind of insists on taking matters in his own hands and try to, get some retribution over his former Evolution buddy. But, even though Teddy Long realizes that Orton is somewhat hurt, but, Orton is just kind of like trying to fight it through. He doesn't care exactly how much damage that'll do to him, but all it matters is that he still wants to get his hands on Batista after what he's done to him. And Batista has also got his agenda and his settled the score with Orton because he cost him the opportunity, and thus this makes it a last man standing match. The match is not going to end cleanly, or it won't have like an actual victor, but what will happen here is that Batista is going to spear Orton through the minitron, which will result in a double knockout. So neither men are able to stand up at the count of 10. So therefore the match results in a no contest. But yeah, so the Batista Orton program is still escalating to an all-time high. Actually, we'll have a breather, and this would open up with a promo by Lita, basically addressing the state of the women's division, especially now that Trish Stratus had retired with the women's title. So the title, as of now, has been declared vacant. Lita just cuts a promo just trashing about Trish Stratus and how Lita thinks that Trish feels like she retired thinking that she is better than everyone on the women's roster and that she retires women's champion. Lita is just trying to get under Trish's skin, even though it's obvious that Trish is not even under a WWE contract anymore, and let alone no longer even competing in a wrestling ring and whatnot. So Lita proclaims herself that she is the undisputed alpha female of the women's division, which also kind of rubs the rest of the women wrestlers or the roster, whether it's not just ones that are representing the Raw brand, but also like women wrestlers from like Smackdown and ECW. So they're all kind of getting involved in all this debacle. A segment that would eventually develop into sort of an angle that I've kind of proposed, especially now that Trish is gone, just kind of wondering as to what the next phase would be for the women's division. And I know that they did a tournament in reality, but I think we could do something a lot more significant than just a tournament just solely for the woman on Monday Night Raw, but also give an opportunity for some of the female roster from SmackDown and ECW, so they're kind of all getting involved in this debacle as to determine who is not only the best woman to represent a certain brand, but also as far as who's, without a shadow of a doubt, the best woman to represent the WWE in general, or sports entertainment, professional wrestling, with ECW being looked at as a separate entity from the WWE. This would be a battle royal to determine who will walk out with the women's title. But yeah, this is sort of kind of laying the groundwork for what's going to happen. Now we have is the World Tag Team title belts being up for grabs. And I would have the World's Greatest Tag Team, they're going to retain the belts over the Thrill Seekers, Johnny Jeter and Nick Nemeth. Thrill Seekers have been scoring up some victories, even scoring their first pay-per-view victory in a six-man tag at Unforgiven. So this consecutive winning streaks allows the Thrill Seekers to qualify for a shot at the World Tag Team titles. And this would actually be a hopefully a pretty solid match, but it wouldn't be as long as, let's say, the last man standing match was, but at least long enough where the two teams could really showcase the best of their talents, I guess you could say. But despite the Thrill Seekers' efforts, Haas and Benjamin are going to come out on top, retain the World Tag Team titles. And then afterwards, we get a debuting Crime Time, JTG, Shad Gaspard. So Crime Time have been coming out with these sort of vignettes, and they have been debuting around this time. To really give them that kind of strong start, I would have them ambush the likes of Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin, assault them from behind. I'm gonna do sort of a slightly, like, maybe not a slight take, but kind of more of like different take from what we got with Crime Time, since they were sort of like a parody of the stereotypical gangster from the urban city of New York. What I have sort of like Crime Time being sort of like the Briscoes from ROH, or like what the Usos, especially in recent years, with their heel run. So it's going to be something along those lines as far as their persona is concerned. I would have them like JTG and Shad would come out with these sort of like flat jackets, and maybe come on with a hockey mask, sort of like Jason Voorhees of sorts. Where they come out with like a mask and whatnot. They're gonna come out there. They're gonna attack Haas and Benjamin, and really try to make a statement overall. So really kind of give Crime Time, a strong start, and to really continue to add some flavor in the tag team division. Then we have is John Cena taking on The Undertaker. Now this was a match that they did in the actual Family Reunion episode. And one additional thing that I would add here is that since Taker's in his program with Mr. Kennedy, so Kennedy's coming out there providing some guest commentary throughout the match. Eventually that'll end in DQ with Kennedy attacking Undertaker. And while Cena is just kind of alone in the ring, Carlito's gonna also ambush on Cena. There's just a lot of a brawling that ensues throughout the ring, leading into an announcement that Cena and Carlito will have their Unforgiven rematch announced for the following week's Raw. And the main event to close out Monday Night Raw, this will be a 6-person mix or intergender tag, but this will have DX and Mickie James going over Edge, Lita, and what would have been Umaga, but based on what would happen in the previous Raws leading into this show, Umaga would be taken out of action during a sort of backstage brawl that would ensue with Shawn and Hunter just decimating the crap out of Umaga. Armando Estrada will take over Umaga's spot in this 6-person mixed tag or intergender tag. DX and Mickie are going to go over. Shawn's going to be the legal man to pin Armando Estrada, having him take the fall. Sweet chin music, 1, 2, 3, and allowing him, along with Mickie James and Triple H, to pick up a victory for their team. Just a card that I just kind of booked for fun, but also something to kind of also lay the groundwork for what will happen throughout the several weeks leading into Cyber Sunday, and as well as Survivor Series and Smackdown. So there you go at that. We'll kick off Cyber Sunday with a, as Teddy Long would quote, a tag team match with two legends, Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Sergeant Slaughter, teaming up to face Nick Dinsmore and Matt Striker. Now, basically really summarizing the events that have happened for the past 3 to 4 months or so. So I really want to try to use this to kind of get the crowd rolling, as I've reiterated in previous installments. But yeah, Duggan and Slaughter by this point were already considered legends in the business. And Dinsmore along with Matt Striker, this will be a culmination of everything that's happened up to this point. And I would have Dinsmore and Striker go over Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Sergeant Slaughter. Now, I was trying to consider what particular match stipulation I would have, but nothing really came to mind. well, except a flag match, but this could do, especially as a traditional standard tag team match. But the important thing is that the up and coming wrestlers would go over the already established legends, and so I would have Nick Dinsmore and Matt Striker be the ones to take the to eventually win the match. Second match, this will be a 2 out of 3 falls, and this is going to be for the Intercontinental title. Jeff Hardy to face Johnny Nitro. Now, this is a continuation of the initial encounter that they had at Unforgiven, and this would be a opportunity in which this would sort of determine as far as who is the better wrestler overall, especially in the Raws leading to Cyber Sunday. We would see Hardy and Nitro trying to get the best out of one another. This would hopefully be the final encounter at Cyber Sunday, which would be a 2 out of 3 falls. So I think this could be, just a really good to great match. It would definitely get a lot of time compared to what they got the previous pay per view. But I'm sure, I mean, these guys had some really good to great chemistry, and Hardy's gonna walk out as the new Intercontinental Champion. Melina, being Nitro's valet, she's gonna get escorted out of the ringside. So this kind of gives Nitro a bit of a detriment, but also benefits Jeff Hardy now that there isn't any like outside interference that's stopping him from potentially winning the match. Now we have a submission match, which will be Chris Masters taking on Ric Flair. Basically, self-explanatory, really. Chris Masters, known for using the Master Lock. Ric Flair, the master of the Figure Four. So this would kind of be the whole theme of this particular match here. Idea that I sort of came up with for the Raws leading into Cyber Sunday would be Ric Flair just making a mockery out of Chris Masters, knowingly that he does the Master Lock challenge in these individual segments to determine which contestant would be the first one to break out of his Master Lock. Now, Ric Flair's also doing a similar thing, but except he calls it, the Figure Four Challenge. So he gets all these like lower tier wrestlers to volunteer in this challenge of his, or it could be like someone from the crowd, a local jobber. Flair is just completely trying to get under Master's skin, and Flair's just completely making a mockery out of Chris Masters when it comes to the challenge, and Flair just counteract with a challenge of his own. But Ric Flair, he's doing the Figure Four challenge. He's making guys submit, and Flair's just trying to up one all these random wrestlers that are trying to volunteer throughout the many Raws. We have this match, and Masters is going to go over Ric Flair. Flair's doing all he can to escape the Master Lock, just like many other wrestlers have in the past. And Masters is just, doing his best not to let go. After a while, he just taps out reluctantly. Chris Masters gets that victory. Really try to put over Chris Masters as the masterpiece. Not just the better man in the match, but that without a shadow of doubt that he's the best damn submissionist to ever grace the WWE ring. And so Masters is just the one that gets the last laugh. And despite Flair's efforts, it just wasn't enough. Unfortunately, Flair's just happens to be one of the many victims. They weren't really doing a whole lot with him even when he came back. I know he had a little mini program he had with Jerry Lawler, but that was like something that was like on Raw and not something that you would see on like pay-per-view. But I think this Flair Masters program could really do some favors or do some wonders, especially for the masterpiece. Now we have is the Interbrand Tag Team match. Now, what this is that this is going to be an 8-man tag team match consisting of wrestlers from Monday Night Raw challenging the wrestlers from ECW. Now, for my side, as far as the choices that I made for Team Raw, I would have these two tag teams, the Highlanders and the Thrill Seekers. These two tag teams that don't just seem to really coexist, and they're forced to pair up together and take on the 4 wrestlers that would represent ECW. Now, I won't necessarily mention the actual wrestlers that would compete, but there would be two baby faces and two heels kind of paired up and taking on a a group of wrestlers from the opposite brand. This will be sort of extreme rules to kind of coincide with the involvement of the ECW wrestlers that are competing in the match. Something to kind of really entertain the crowd. Yeah, how all this stems is that, with Paul Heyman, he's spent months trying to reestablish ECW for what just for those that aren't necessarily familiar with the product. He has his heavyweight division. He's got a TV deal now. A couple other things that Heyman had expressed his desire in is having a tag team division. Now, if you had referred back to my previous video at No Mercy, the FBI, who would be challenging Brian Kendrick and Paul London for those SmackDown tag team titles, unfortunately, they get the short end of the stick. And the deal that Heyman had with Teddy Long is that if the FBI were to win the tag team titles, they would take him over to ECW to help jumpstart his own tag team division. Now, unfortunately, that didn't go as accordingly when Kendrick and London managed to overcome the odds and defeat the FBI and retaining the tag team titles on SmackDown. So Teddy Long doesn't really have anything to lose, especially having to go through all that sort of conflict that he had to go through with Paul Heyman. Vince McMahon, he appoints two tag teams and having Paul Heyman to utilize some of the wrestlers from his roster to go face to face against Vince McMahon's. And we have this 8-man tag team match. But since ECW's been around since June of '06, they've been around since throughout the summer, and they're still going strong. ECW, especially given this is the first pay-per-view that I've had here, since the first pay-per-view that I've booked the brand as opposed to having their own show with One Night Stand. Other than that, I haven't really booked any like ECW wrestlers so far up until this point. But to kind of really utilize that opportunity to really try to get people reeling in viewers for this pay-per-view. So I would have the ECW team go over the Monday Night Raw team of the Thrill Seekers and the Highlanders and trying to cement the third brand as a threat, especially against WWE. Then we have is the Inner Brand Battle Royal, and this is going to be for the vacated Women's Championship. Trish Stratus had her last match at Unforgiven in her hometown of Toronto, Canada. So she vacates the belt, while the Women's Championship is the belt that is primarily defended on Monday Night Raw. This also gives an opportunity to move forward in trying to utilize the women's roster from the other brands with SmackDown ECW. So they're going to somehow chime in this whole mix and start making these sort of invasions, whether they be in the crowd coming out there to attack some of the superstars of Monday Night Raw. ECW would do the same thing. There would just be like a 3-team brand warfare that would go on in the weeks leading up to this pay-per-view. So Cyber Sunday comes along. This will be Inner Brand Battle Royal. Who is without a doubt, the best woman that could ever grace in this particular division. So this match is going on, and it comes down to Lita and Mickie James, who brawl back and forth for a bit before eliminating each other over the ropes and landing at ringside at the same time, declaring this match to be a no contest. With the way that, after Trish Stratus went out the way she did, this also gives me more room to come up with a particular angle for the women's division, because even after the Lita Mickie program, especially after with Trish gone and Lita on her way out in November, so you're kind of at that point where it seemed like the women's division was just kind of going through like I think it really took a long time for the division to really find its footing, especially looking at it in hindsight now with the influx of these new male wrestlers that are coming up from like NXT or they've been wrestling in the indies and using that as sort of a stepping stone to get to the main roster. Now we've seen like a new wave of women's wrestling and how the perception being perceived as eye candy, especially in 2006 compared to the stark contrast that we would see in this day and age and having these wrestlers in this particular women's division really showcasing some athleticism with more of involvement in storyline. So I think after with Lita and Trish being gone, it just the women's division was just really empty. Like there was just a fire that was missing. I had to come up with something that would try and reinvigorate the division and to see what the next step or the next phase for what I'm about to do. Unfortunately, this match is going to end in a draw, giving the excuse of, since Survivor Series coming up, Lita and Mickey are still going to continue to feud. Now we have is a 6-man tag team match. This will be John Cena and the recently debuting Crime Time. This is basically the Crime Time Nation there. But here I refer to them as the Chain Gang, which will be like a little faction of sorts named after Cena's fan base. In a match where Carlito's fighting John Cena on Raw, Crime Time would interfere in another match and thus provoking another rivalry in Carlito while Haas and Benjamin come out there in order to make the save. So a 6-man tag team match ensues. Given that this is the pay-per-view debut of Crime Time, so the Chain Gang are going to go over the world's greatest tag team along with Carlito. I would have Charlie Haas be the one to take the fall. As far as fans voting is concerned, this would either be like elimination rules or one fall to a finish. But preferably, since Survivor Series is around the corner, this would just be one fall to a finish. Now we have is the first out of the 2 doubleheader matches. This is going to involve the ambulance match. We'll have Shawn Michaels take on Umaga. So they've been kind of going back and forth at it since Unforgiven, and the feud continues to escalate in the Raws leading up to the show. Michaels and Umaga, this gives them an opportunity to really pull out all the stops. There's no restrictions. Weapons are allowed. The only way to win this match is putting your opponent inside the back of the ambulance. Umaga is going to go over Shawn Michaels here. But this is going to be a hard-fought bout, though. And I could really imagine just Michaels just performing like this blade job that he normally does, especially when it comes to these high-profile matches that he's been in. And Umaga is just going to be like this sadistic Samoan bulldozer that he was, and will continue here, and to really prove that Umaga, like there's just no stopping this monster. Just really shows no remorse whatsoever. And so he's gonna go over Shawn Michaels. Now we have in our main event. Now originally I was gonna consider doing a Hell in a Cell match between the two, but then I realized that out of the many legends that were brought into this show, I noticed that Dusty Rhodes actually was showing up on WWE TV at this point, and utilizing that connection that Triple H has on the NWA. What made Dusty Rhodes, as far as the matches that he's been involved in over the years, obviously you have War Games. And also another match that he was also involved in, and that's a Texas Death Match. And I kind of figured, hey, you know what? Since Dusty Rhodes is actually on this show, so why not, take this opportunity to sanction a Texas Death Match for the first time in WWE history. Edge, going in as the champion, will defend the belt against Triple H in that particular match stipulation. But as far as the referee is concerned, I basically gave it away here. So Dusty Rhodes would be appointed as the special guest referee. Edge and Triple H will just tear each other apart. Now, the rules of a Texas death match is very similar to Last Man Standing. Only difference is that you have to be required to pin your opponent before the referee could start counting to 10. The only wrestler that stands at the count of 10 would be declared the winner. Edge will go over Triple H. Edge being the rated R superstar. I mean, hardcore matches are no strangers to him. He's been through a lot of carnage throughout the course of 2006, and he wouldn't mind being up for the challenge because he's always, he compares himself to a berserker, someone that's very hungry for combat, someone that's thirsty for a fight overall. Utilizing that sort of analogy, I guess you could say, but this will obviously involve the WWE Championship belt being up for grabs, and despite a hard-fought bout, Edge is the one standing tall, and he walks out of Cyber Sunday. He's still the WWE champion. Dusty Rhodes, being the referee, is going to try and make sure that the match goes along accordingly. Maybe some bickering between Edge and Dusty Rhodes and some, back and forth verbal arguments amongst the two. Probably to some extent with Triple H, even despite the fact that he and Dusty are portrayed as like baby faces going into this show. So there won't necessarily be like a lot of heated arguments in the way compared to Edge, but I think they could definitely really tear the house down, especially with the match stipulation alone. I realized that Cyber Sunday was held in Ohio and not necessarily Texas, but the rules could apply even if you refer it to a different name of match. And Edge is going to walk out of Cyber Sunday as still your WWE champion. So that's basically my card for WWE Cyber Sunday. I've stressed this out early in the video, just kind of wondering just why they even had another pay-per-view when you have another one like Survivor Series just a few weeks away. And I tried to make the best out of this card and try to make something out of it. Hopefully it's something that'll have viewers considering to order this pay-per-view. Maybe they're interested in, maybe a couple matches here, maybe all the matches that are on here. Let me know what you think of the card down in the comment section below. Stay tuned as I will book the next November pay-per-view event, which will be Survivor Series. So stick around if you're still interested. Thank you all guys for watching. And till then, this is the Gold Standard 0924 signing out.